Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly show of What is School For? My name is I'm the CEO of Classroom Without Walls and the host of this weekly live streaming show. You can also listen to us on the traditional audio only podcast. Just search What is School For? On this show, I interview leading education leaders, teachers, parents, students, entrepreneurs, business leaders to come here to discuss, debate, and disrupt education. Our goal is to future-proof the next generation. Today, I am extremely excited and honored to have Dr. Suniya Luthar on the show to talk about the real cost of sending our children to high-achieving schools. And this is something that I wish I knew 10 years ago when I just became a mom. Parenting would have been a lot easier for me. And Dr. Luthar she got her PhD from Yale University. She also taught there for quite a few years and later taught at Arizona University and Columbia University. And she is also the co-founder and chief research officer at Authentic Connections. We're really going to dive into her body of research over the last several decades regarding children attending high-achieving schools. And what are the problems, which is very counterintuitive, and also what can parents do to help our children become emotionally resilient. We're also going to tap into Dr. Luthar's research on resilience and talk about the connection between resilience and relationship. And as parents, how can we cultivate authentic connections with our children? So much good stuff. I'm super excited. And as always, a big shout out to StreamYard for being a sponsor of Classroom Without Walls. Over the last 4 years, I have tried quite a few different third-party tools to go live. StreamYard is my favorite. In the comment section, there is a discount code that allows you to check out StreamYard for 2 weeks for free. And so check it out and shoot me a message if you have any questions. We're live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Periscope, and on Twitch. If you are live with us right now, let me know in the comment section where you are joining us live from, social media-wise and geographically speaking. Without any further ado, Dr. Luthar, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited. As you can probably tell, I'm so excited to have this interview. To get prepared for this interview, I have been binge reading and binge watching many of your articles and videos. And the more I get to know you and the more respect I have for you for dedicating your entire educational career to doing what you do. So I think everyone is here. We're all in for a treat. So let's get started. So today we're talking about high achieving schools. And can you give us like a very simple and brief definition regarding high achieving schools so that everyone is on the same page?
Absolutely. I would say schools whose standardized test scores tend to be in the upper third, as simple as that. Mm-hmm. Not the top 5%, not 10%, but generally the upper third of SAT scores or AP test scores and so on. So that's it. That's a high achieving school.
Incredible. And so before I dive into the specifics of your research findings, which are absolutely mind-blowing when I first discovered it, so share with us what inspired you to study children attending those high-achieving schools. As far as I know, I think you are the only person I know who is doing research on this topic. So share with us what inspired you to study this specific demographic.
I wish I could say that I was inspired by something. Actually, it was quite accidental for 2 issues. I was doing a study on inner city kids. That was my dissertation work, and I followed inner city kids for teenagers for quite a while. And one study, we found a comparison study of these kids in poverty with suburban kids, that the suburban kids were actually doing more poorly than their counterparts in poverty. It was that finding that had me scratching my head and said, what is this? And is this real? Is it an adolescent phenomenon we're looking at? So we started at that point that was the beginning of this 20-year-long journey so far of trying to get in depth to understand what's going on. Initially, when I first saw this, I thought it was an aspect because of affluence, about community affluence. And it was jumping all the way to now. What we've learned over time, it's not necessarily affluence, family affluence, or even community affluence. It's really being the high-achieving, high-pressure context that is the culprit, if you will, of these elevated levels of anxiety, depression, rule-breaking, substance use, you name it.
Well, it's really fascinating. I'm going to share my screen for a second. Sure. And so this is actually a very powerful article that I also shared in the comment section that everyone can check it out. So this is published from Washington Post, and which actually featured Dr. Luthar's research. Students in high-achieving schools are now named an at-risk group. When I first read articles like this and discovered your research, Dr. Luthar, I was like, this cannot be true. It is so counterintuitive, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about high-achieving schools, those are the schools, they have more resources, mm-hmm. they have fancier buildings and labs, and academically more rigorous and enriching extracurricular activities. And as I learned this, I think in one of the studies you mentioned that those kids who attend high-achieving schools, they have the same level of mental health issues as children grew up in poverty, foster care, and who have a parent in prison. I was like, I almost felt like I misread the article. I had to go back and to reread it. So can you elaborate on some of the findings for us, give us some specific symptoms that the children are dealing with, and just explain this body of research to us in more details?
Sure. So in terms of symptoms, what we found is relative to national norms, let's say American kids as a whole, kids who are in these high-achieving schools tend to report higher levels of clinically significant depression, anxiety, rule-breaking, and substance use. So it basically covers the gamut of internalizing symptoms like inner-directed as well as outward-directed conduct problems and so on. So that's on the symptom front what we're seeing. Let's get to another whys. Maybe 2013, my students and I wrote a paper, I can, therefore I must. And that is sort of the credo or the mantra by which our children, and I might add, we live by. If it is possible, if it's doable, then you must do it. Whether that means getting the extra 5 points on your exam or your test scores, or taking on the one extracurricular activity. So that becomes, when you said there are so many resources available, sometimes that can come and work can be counterproductive in the sense that we then feel, because I have this, then I must make use of it, and there's really nothing, there's no ceiling effect. There's nothing coming from the outside saying, all right, my love, you've done enough now, you don't need to take on this one extra thing. So that's in a nutshell why we moved to where from saying it's affluence, it really is about this competition, about feeling like there's never enough. You just have to keep going if it's within your reach at all. Mm-hmm. Get the extra tutor, get the extra time, sleep 1 hour less, whatever you need to do, just keep adding to that resume of yours.
Yeah, definitely. I just like listening to you talk. And so are you still saying that parents, because we have the means, actually, when this was almost 10 years ago, when my husband and I, when I gave birth to our first son 10 years ago, and that's exactly what we did, looking at our means, and we want to send our kids to the best school within our financial means. I think it is just very natural for parents to think that way. And it reminds me of, my husband and I, we actually spent 3 years in South Korea. I don't know if I shared the story on the live stream. And so what I discovered, people in South Korea, children, they have so much pressure. You won't believe this, Dr. Luthar. And so our kids, they went to an international school, and at the time, they were only second grade. So we really got to know some Korean moms. And so it is really popular in Korea to send their kids, second grade kids, to a prep school to get them prepared to go to an Ivy League school in the United States. when I first heard that, I was like, what? Second graders and a university, an Ivy League school in the United States. And then later I learned is that it is actually very competitive to get into those prep schools so that their kids can be really Ivy League ready. It is so shocking. So did you see something like similar in the United States, and this obsession with like high achieving schools, Ivy League schools in the United States, and like on a global scale?
Yeah, in fact, it's so interesting you say this, that in your introduction of me, the one thing that you didn't say and I didn't say is I'm also a mom of, I have 2 kids who I raised through this similar high achieving school context. So the short answer to your question is yes, the levels of pressure, I imagine, may be a little more intense overseas, like in India or Korea or Japan or China, because as the added factor of now you have to make it to first get into this country and learn the ways of what works here and what doesn't work here. So there probably is a little more pressure overseas even than there is here. But it's the same phenomenon. It is the feeling of there's a scarce commodity here, right? Which is the scarce commodity is entrance into one of these highly sought after colleges or universities. So number one, it's scarce. And number two, there's such profound fear that's been created among children and parents that if you don't make it into one of those, your life is over. Which is, pardon me, so does not make sense. But this is the mindset into which generally kids in these schools, this is a mindset they're bought into, as have parents and teachers and the community and the administrators. So it is not, you can't put the blame squarely on any one of these sort of forces. It's all around. It's ubiquitous. It's pervasive, this message of if you can, then you must. Make it for that top level place, or else your life is just not going to be good.
Yeah, if you can, you must. Yeah. And you like this constant, we talk about how children are constantly in this comparison game. And I think as parents, and they are in this comparison game as well, probably even stronger than our kids. And that's why I feel like, and also including myself, like in the beginning, when I just became a mom, like there's so much ego involved in my own children's future and career and, success.
You are very wise to say that because, once again, when I go and speak to schools, when I do talks with faculty or parents, there is a tendency in all of us to say, what is somebody else doing to make this problem so bad? Oftentimes I hear the parents saying, well, the school should get less homework or do more of this or less of that. And on the teacher side, so the parents should back off and not have such high standards. The reality is it's coming from everywhere. As you correctly said, and I would say the same about myself. I had the high standards, not necessarily because I was terribly ambitious or it was because I had the good fortune of having a good education myself. I wanted the same for my children to the degree I could make it happen. Was it essential that they went to the Ivy League schools? Absolutely not. I went to Yale University for my undergrad and master's, and I told my kids when they were applying to college, I said, I went to Delhi University. It's not even on the map here. So if you really have a fire in your heart about what you want to do and you work hard, it'll happen at some point. You'll get an education. So to go back to what I was saying earlier, you have the parents, you obviously have the schools who want to distinguish themselves and say, we've got the best scores and we're state champions. You've got the teachers, the administrators, you've got the whole community saying, that real estate prices vary depending on test scores and achievements of the public schools. So then in the peers, competition there, we found that envy levels, social comparisons tend to be much higher among our kids in the relatively high achieving schools than elsewhere. So here you are again, what should be a protective factor, closeness to parents, feeling unconditionally accepted by them, by your teachers, by administrators, safe in your community, and close friendships. Even those are threatened. Why? You and I are pals. We're both on the soccer team. We both want to be recruited. There's a scout, and I'm saying, are you there for I or are you there for me? How do you become close with a friend with whom you are in direct competition? Adolescence is a time when you need to have those close friendships. And here's one more way in which those protective processes are thwarted or attacked, just because of this highly competitive culture that pervades everything in these children's lives.
Oh my God, I can so relate. And I'm going to share my screen one more time. And this is me. So I actually took lots of courage from myself to really share my own eating disorder story. And this is, I still remember when my own children, they first saw the picture. They were like, Mommy, that looks like a boy. Is that you? And I was like, yeah, that is actually me. And that is exactly what you were talking about here, Dr. Luther. I went to, throughout my K-12, I grew up in China, and I still, like, probably not, like, a common misperception, not a common perception of kids in China is that academics is very, very important. And that is a true perception. And I went to like a super high achieving, competitive, extremely competitive school throughout my K-12. So by the time I was a high school student, oh my God, as you mentioned, I hated everything. I hated myself. I hated my friends because we're in direct competition. And we started to lie to each other. Did you do your homework? I didn't do my homework. Everybody was lying. And the teacher actually told us, right, all of you guys wanted to go to this Ivy League school and you are competing with each other. If you are not working hard, guess what? They are working harder. So you just have this like really, like, I don't even know how to describe the pressure from the teachers, from society, and from your own parents. And the only thing at the time I could control was food. And I stopped eating for a few years. And that's how bad the entire I was definitely suicidal, and how bad the situation was. Yeah.
I am so sorry. These hurts never go away. You are so brave and so kind to share your story, your personal story, because I think the other thing, going back to your initial question about resources, with so many resources, why are the kids so troubled? There is also paradoxically less utilization of these mental health resources sometimes in high achieving schools. Why? Because kids want to seem perfect. They feel like I can't show any signs of failure. Parents sometimes say these are family issues. We don't want our dirty laundry aired. So then oftentimes kids will suffer as you did. And I'm not sure what kind of resources there were there in China or for me in India growing up. But there is a reluctance sometimes to admit, because there's this veneer of perfection that everybody is encouraged to maintain. You don't want to seem like you're falling behind or that you're not able to make it. But I'm dreadfully sorry for what you went through.
Oh, thank you. And it is so sad to see the situation still. I think it's getting worse in terms of the numbers do not lie, right? Like, I know you use lots of research, and when you look at like suicide rate, it's like becoming really, really, really high. And also this obsession with being perfect, because you are at such a good school and you want to look perfect. And nobody knew that. They just, like in my own case, they just knew. My parents didn't even know that I just like became really thin, but I never shared with anyone. Nobody knew what I was going through internally, but externally, I was still like a really good student, smashing all the A's, and came to the US on scholarship. Everything was just like outside perfect, but internally, I was definitely paralyzed. Yeah. So here is a great comment from Phil. Thank you for joining us live. The cult of business at a young age. And I know like there are even like in China, for example, there are even CEO classes for children at 3 years old. And very competitive. Like, again, talking about affluent communities, because they can afford it. Why not? All the other, they're learning like golfing and like etiquette, social etiquette, all those things at 3 years old, learning about leadership skills and how to become a CEO. Many of my friends actually sent their kids there, and again, coming from affluent families, which is really, really crazy. I don't know about the situation in the US. Are you familiar with this?
It's not necessarily just affluence. It's what I really do want to emphasize, because you take a school where the general test scores are high, and maybe take substance use, for example. We know that substance use levels are higher in these high achieving schools than they are nationally. Now, all you need is 2 or 3 kids who've got access to buying a ton of alcohol or weed or Molly, and they have a party, which means all the peer group then is potentially invited, so that even if I don't have a car or the money to buy these things, I'm certainly exposed to and invited to, hopefully, I'm not a reject, that I'm invited to these parties and I have access to. In the same way, if you're peers are all getting that extra tutoring and extra this and extra that. You may not be getting the tutoring, but you may be feeling like because you can't afford it or your family can't.
That's right.
So that makes you feel like I need to work that much harder to catch up. Like you said, I'm not going to see all of them get the A's and I'm fall behind. So you do whatever you can to keep up, even sometimes if you don't have the resources to have the tutoring and such on. So it's very insidious. It's really as the question was, it's part of the culture. It is the culture.
Definitely, it's almost like a global. I see this almost like as a global trend, a global culture. So here is a question from Dan. Thank you for joining us live. And so his immediate question is like, are private schools or those high achieving schools that we work so hard to get our kids into? Like I even watched a documentary talking about schools in New York City. The competition is like next level. So like are those schools really worth it?
Mm-hmm. So it's whether it's a private school or a public school. Remember, again, if you're going to send your child to a school, let's say in the suburb of New York City, Greenwich, or one of those towns close to the city, it's pretty expensive to live there. So one way or the other, you're paying a lot of money to get your child into that high achieving school, public or private. So let's go to the question now, is it worth it? The answer to your question is, I hate to say this, but it depends, but it does, on what you feel is worth it. The quality of education, there's no question. They have all kinds of opportunities, smaller classes, AP courses, all kinds of extracurriculars. So yes, they have many opportunities open to them. The downside is there is this risk of horrible burnout that can happen because of this confluence of factors that we've been talking about that can really destroy one's mental health. So the worth it question is, it's a question of balance, right? If I feel like for my children, go, do this, do your 3 APs or your 2 APs, learn more, strive more, all good, but not at the cost of your mental health. And that's where the cost becomes horrendous, because too often, I think, as teachers, children, parents, we don't catch it. We don't catch it, like you said so beautifully. You have all these wonderful achievements. You were doing so wonderfully at school, and there was a horrible pain inside. So what happens is that pain does not get detected nearly as soon as it should be, which means when you have an eating disorder, a depressive disorder, substance use disorder, which obviously then tends to stay with you over time. People who have a diagnosis when young are more vulnerable to having a repeat diagnosis when they're older. So that's the overall answer to the question, is it worth it? You will get a better education, no question. The issue is, will you be attentive to the mental health costs that are always there? When you show that article that Jenny Wallace wrote so beautifully for the Washington Post, can you be attentive to, will you be vigilant for, will you intervene when the costs of competition start hitting your child and you to a point where it's starting to become really unbearable, exhausting, unbearable, and destructive?
Wow, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. It reminds me, I think in one of your talks, one of your keynotes, and you were actually citing a report from Robert Wood Johnson's study. They study like adolescents, their mental wellness, and published in 2018. And in that report, they listed 4 top high-risk environmental factors affecting our children's mental health. And number 1 is poverty. Number 2 is trauma. Number 3 is discrimination, and number 4 is the pressure to achieve. So I think you raised such a great point that we really have to ask ourselves, pros and cons, what matters to you? That is such a great point. So for parents who do want to intervene, right? Let's say that my kids do go to a high achieving school, they do have all those mental health issues. So how can parents intervene and cope with that situation and help our kids build more resilience, which is another body of research that you have been doing over the last several decades?
How can we help is doing what you're doing, which is your 10-year-olds, you start young. You start young being attentive to this. So I remember my son, 2nd grade again, talking about the travel team and talking about, will this affect my college admissions, which is just ludicrous. Now, I do remember way back when he was, I think, in yeah, maybe second, third grade. And he came back and said something about which reading track he was in or math track he was in. And it wasn't the top track. And I said, no worries. But I could tell myself there was something about my tone, or I looked a little askance, that I was a little disappointed. So I have been watchful from the get-go, knowing that I'm vulnerable. See, if you look at it like this, in dire poverty, moms and dads have this big culture-specific task: keep your kids physically safe. Don't let them out after sunset into dangerous area. In the same way, we in these communities have this culture-specific task, which is be ever watchful of this pursuit of evermore, which can come out from us in very subtle ways, but our children know us, they feel it and see it. So the answer is be vigilant from the get-go. Talk to your partner, spouse about this, talk to each other, your friends, if you're a single mom or dad, and always talk to your children. You want them to feel, I feel seen and loved for the child, the person I am, not for the splendor of my accomplishments. From the get-go. You can't start saying that in high school and expect them to absorb it. So the way you deal with their failures and their setbacks and their, very importantly, how you live your own life.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I mean, I work with kids like middle school, high school, college age students. And so often that children will actually come to me to share like vulnerably that they feel like their parents don't really love them. The only thing they care about is their academic performance. And oftentimes when I do like for my own business, when I do coaching calls with parents, and the very second or first sentence they tell me is like, my kid is like straight A students. They always use that as a way to define their children's identity and how much love, how much support. It's just like overly obsessed with academic performance for sure. Yeah.
You know, as I'm listening to you, I'm also looking at you as a mom and myself as a mom. There is an insecurity that we have as well, right? When we say don't define yourself in terms of your children's successes, and I said we have to look at how we ourselves live and are, there's no judgment here. Let me say it right on top. There's no judging anybody here. But you and I, certainly I can speak for myself, I'm prone to doing that. I'm prone to saying, my goodness, I didn't get that grant, or I'm still looking for grants, or I didn't get, this kind of recognition, and it hurts my feelings. So if my sense of self-worth is dependent on that, that's the first task. That's the first task for me to address. I need to be feeling as a mother that I'm loved, I'm lovable, and I'm loved, and I'm held, and I'm safe. If I don't feel that as a mother, and this is my big thing, I'm sure you've heard me say, who mothers mommy? Who takes care of the caregivers? If you don't feel secure in the fact that you are loved and lovable, how are you going to show that message to your children?
That's right. That's right. It's such a like education is an inside out journey, and parenting is even more so an inside out journey. And we really need to take care of our own needs. And you are so absolutely right. Even though knowing what I know today, I'm still easily affected. My husband knows this. I went to University of Maryland for graduate school, and we have a group of Chinese friends there. And now almost all of them are moms and dads. So we have our private online social media chat group. Every time when I go to that group, I just feel like, am I doing enough as a mom? They're all doing it's like a checklist, right? Like who was the person talking about this checklist, childhood, like check. I was like, I'm now checking this, I'm now checking that. And the pressure is real. And I just feel like, oh my God, I feel like I need to do something. Are our children, my own kids, are they behind? So you have to constantly really recognize that. I mean, it is a tough job for sure. Yeah.
Once again, I'm going to latch on to something you said, which is we need to take care of ourselves. Right? And my response to that is anytime people say, all right, Suniya, you're saying moms or dads or whoever should take better care of themselves. My response is no. I'm saying they should prioritize being taken care of. I'm not telling you, hey, I take better care of yourself. I'm saying I need to be loved and held and cradled just the way you want your child to be. We don't stop needing that just because we got PhDs and we have 3 children or are 62 years old. We all need that. And we go rivers. In fact, there's an article that just came out yesterday, I think, in Time magazine on resilience, where this Kate Rowe has written so beautifully about this, brought together resilience research and emphasizes very clearly the answer is relationships, loving, supportive relationships for kids in much the same way, in exactly the same way. The answer is the same is true for us. The trouble is in everyday discourse in America, or perhaps most parts of the world, we don't focus on that. It sounds ludicrous to think of why would a grown, competent, intelligent man or woman need this kind of holding. It is true, we do. Nobody outgrows this, ever. And we need to learn as a society, as humanity, that this needs to be prioritized and not be latching on to just do more yoga, just do more mindfulness. Those are all great things. I'm not saying don't do them, but that is not the root of resilience. The root of resilience is always, always, always having that safety net of blankets, that safety net of loving, supportive relationships.
Wow, that is really powerful, because I'm also very interested in resilience. But your body of work is the first, you are the first scholar who actually helped me understand. Wow, there is a tight connection between resilience and relationship. I never actually thought about it. And one thing, Dr. Luthar, that you shared really shocked me in one of the talks. And the example is that, as parents, we give our students, we give our kids positive affirmations. I love you. You're amazing. You're good. But also there are days we really say hurtful things to our kids. But those hurtful statements are a lot more damaging. I think you said 3 times more damaging than the good statements that we tell our children. And so can you explain that to us? And to me, that is fascinating. I feel like every parent needs to understand that. Yeah.
You are so insightful, and you really catch on to the biggest, most important take-home messages, and this is one of them. When we speak about risk and protective factors of fostering resilience, most people automatically think about positive, do more praise, do more support, and so on. But in reality, that is stronger than good. The power of my ugly words to you is much greater than the power of my nice, sweet, kind words to you. And in the literature on resilience, you will see, we call it effect sizes. In other words, what's the strength of the association? Much bigger for perceived maltreatment or abuse or neglect. It's not to say that I am an abusive mom, but it's to say if my child perceives me as being unkind or mean or neglectful, the effect of that on his or her or their mental health is much bigger than the effect of the praise and so on. So it's paradoxical. You're saying, how do we promote resilience? If you look at the literature, the first most important thing in parenting is say, minimize, or in any relationship, minimize harshness and unkindness and destructive social contact, all the negative forces, let's minimize it. That's the first course of action, minimize the negative. And the second is, if you have to prioritize, and there always has to be a priority, because we can't do everything, right? I can't give you a list of 25 things. I mean, I can, but that's rubbish. 25 things, I'll go do all this in your parenting and watch for all this. So we in developmental science, in child development, and this is in the National Academies of Science report 2019, Vibrant and Healthy Kids. It's a big, thick report that lays out for parents, chapter 4, and for caregivers, what are the most important parenting issues, what order we need to pay attention to them. And you know what the answer is? If you want kids to be, quote, show resilience, make sure that the primary caregiver is doing well. Right?
Wow.
Yeah, it's not even take care of the kid.
Wow.
It's not even tell you what kind of parent to be. It's simply, if I want your child to be resilient through COVID or whatever stresses, my job is to make sure that you are doing well. And that then filters down through all your children in all your parenting behaviors and so on. Because you're upstream, remember? You're here. The child is here with you. You're upstream. So instead of directly working with the child, this is what makes sense, doesn't it? Common sense.
That's right. Wow, this is so eye-opening, right? Because we have quite a few parents here. Let me know if you can relate, because to most of us, when we think about parenting, the entire focus is on the kids, right? Do this, don't do this. But what you shared with us is so powerful, taking care of our own emotions when things are going bad and managing ourselves. Wow, that is something I never thought about. So can you give us some like examples or tips or guidelines in terms of, do you have those moments when things go wrong? You said things like, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. So how do you undo the damage, so to speak? Like, how do you even like manage your own emotions, especially when things are going wrong, so that we don't say hurtful things to our kids that we will regret, in 10 minutes later?
Yeah, so see, it's so fascinating that, again, your question to me is, how do you manage your own emotions? Or how do you take care of it? And my answer is, I can't always do it by myself. Really, what I need is help and support. Of course, I've made mistakes. And of course, I've been what I think of as rather miserable as a parent for maybe a week, an hour, a day, doesn't matter. But of course, I've fallen down. How do I get up? I can say, buck yourself up and pray or exercise. But really what has always got me through is having that support. I used to call it my advisory committee when I was raising my kids. And now the answer when you say what to tell parents is what I've been doing, these authentic connections groups, which are basically groups for moms or dads or primary care or educators, where you make use of this mutual support. Good psychotherapy helps, but nothing heals like love in real life. So sitting with another group of moms like yourself, and you express your pain or your embarrassment or shame at having fallen down on the job, you see these kind, loving faces coming and saying, I've been there. I've been there, I've done that. I've got you. I'm with you. And that's how, you hear about it takes a village. It takes a village for a mom to do her job. It takes a village for any parent to raise a child anywhere. So that's where we're missing the picture. Instead of saying, go do this for yourself and here are parenting behaviors, the answer is always ensure that you've got this safety net. And that needs to be your highest priority. Look for people that you trust, that you love, and put that high on your list of priorities. Now, all the talks I do during COVID, I said, it needs to be on your calendar. No, oh yeah, I'll talk to my friends. You need to speak to, you're my go-to person. What about Wednesday evening, Saturday morning? We get together and talk about things that matter to us, not just about the football game or the weather, but on things, especially now during COVID, things that are meaningful.
That's such a powerful message. I hope everyone watching this right now and watching the replay is really getting this. And I also remember you mentioned, Dr. Luthar, that like moms, our own emotions and what we do to our kids seem to have a stronger effect on the children than dads. Is that right? Did I quote you wrong?
Yes, in general, it is, it's not necessarily, it is true. When you think about moms being unkind or being seen as unkind as opposed to dads, the effect tends to be stronger among kids. Mostly because they spend more time with the mother generally than moms are generally the primary caregivers. Whatever the reasons are, it's not to say that dads are unimportant by any means, but when you have mom and dad in the same household, overall the effect is bigger for moms than it is for dads.
Yeah, I love this. And we have we have quite a few people here. We have lots of comments from our live audience. And here's a great comment from Kitty. And thank you for joining us live. And she thinks that an additional risk is that those children learn those behaviors, right, as the norm, right? Like alcohol abuse, they normalize abnormal behaviors and in terms of how they deal with stress. And it will take quite some time for them to unlearn that part. Yeah.
When you say unlearn that part, it's to me almost impossible if that's all you've ever known. It's being on that treadmill constantly, watch your parents doing it constantly and your friends doing it and your community doing it. Where is the role model that teaches you differently? How is that cycle going to be broken? So it takes a great deal of, again, proactive effort for all of us as educators, parents, as communities to say, we need to keep an eye on this and stop this. It is going back to the previous question, simply not worth it. Simply not worth it. For a child to be struggling alone with an eating disorder and that much pain and that much anguish, it's just not at any level.
Yeah, and this again goes back to what we have been talking about, the important role that parents play in their children's entire journey. We have to be strong and stay educated and stay informed and stay critical. And so many parents, they just, especially, this is what I observe, especially when the parents send their children to a really good, high achieving school, they're just like so hands off. They think, oh, I paid my money. What else do you need from me, right? Like they just outsource parenting to a school and assume that a really good school is going to take care of their kids. But what we're hearing from you is that that's only part of the picture. As parents, there's so much more that we need to do to stay strong, stay educated, and stay informed.
And stay well, my love. It's not just informed, but stay well and stay replenished. I was talking to school counselors. I do groups for school counselors and for school heads and so on. Everybody's empty right now with this wretched COVID. Everybody is running on fumes. So the deal really is, and she said, my tank is pretty much like this. My full tank used to be full. It's pretty much on empty right now. So the task really is to make sure, be educated by all means, know what the science is, know what the data show, but always, always, always make sure that you are psychologically and emotionally replenished. It's work. Sometimes it's hard for us to reach out because we don't want to be a nuisance. We don't want to be seen as needy. Whatever the reasons are, it's hard work. But it's essential. We're not going to get through this. The science is unequivocal. We have to do this for ourselves and our children and each other.
Yeah, totally. I'm just reading the comments. It seems like many of you can't hear us on LinkedIn. I don't know. So try to check this out on Facebook. So Alexander, can you share the link in the chat box so people can watch this? I definitely don't want anyone to miss any part. I'm just catching up on the comments. So try to watch this on something may be wrong with LinkedIn. So try to watch us on Facebook and see if you can catch us live on Facebook. And it seems like people on Facebook are doing okay. So here is a great comment from Alice, and thank you. She's a great educator herself. And she said that sadly, school is less about learning and more about achieving. That is probably even more so at those high achieving schools. And I agree that parents are subject to the same pressure of wanting their kids to achieve and don't truly understand the hidden cost. That's a great point. Yeah. Do you agree with her first part, Dr. Luthar? And schools are more about achieving and less about learning?
I think, unfortunately, increasingly so, because once again, those test scores are your report card as a school is what brings in the money, what brings in the admission, the application, and so on. So yes, there is a very big focus on getting those scores up and keeping them up. And also, I think it was Alice who said the pressures on the parents really are very real. We have a lot of sort of derision toward parents and judgment of parents, saying things like they're highly too overprotective, they don't allow their kids to fail, and basically that they're not okay in any number of ways. The fact is the parents themselves we do the best we can. I'm sure you did, I did, we do the very best we can. Do we fall down the job? Yes. Once again, be gentle. Show grace toward yourself as you're trying to show toward your children. And that's the only way this is going to happen. Kids do what they see, right? They don't do what you tell them to.
That's right.
If we are able to show ourselves that grace and back off a little bit and be a little more secure about our own sense of self, right? That my sense of self-worth does not depend on how famous I get or how rich I get. I am a lovable human being. That is the thing that I most need to hang on to.
That's right. Yeah. Here is just like resonating on what you said, Dr. Luthar. He's a great comment from our dear friend, Pam. Thank you for joining us live. And such a great question, right? She asked, invite us to think about, are those opportunities self-chosen or they're imposed to our children by the parents' insecurity? And she also realized that the world is changing and very fast. The potential is limited. And I do agree that, when you look at a global scale, the competition is a lot more intense. You have kids, I'm only familiar with kids in China and Korea. You have those kids go to 3-year-old CEO classes, whereas I think if you are a parent, you feel like, wow, how can my kid survive in this global, not just national, but this global competition? So I guess the question is like, where do we draw that balance? Right? You want to push, you said that earlier, have high expectations for your children. You want them to do well in life, but at the same time, you don't want to push them so hard. So are there ways for us to have like to draw a balance? And if so, like, how do you even draw that balance?
Answer is communicate with your child and find out all the time. There was this Atlantic article on the suicide cluster of suicides in Silicon Valley a few years ago. And I remember there's one child who spoke there about maybe being on the swim team and being an outstanding champion and so on. And she said, I hated it. I just hated it. I so wanted to drop it. In the same way, your child might decide, I want to be a trumpet player. I want to be a physics major and AP math, physics, and calculus and everything. Talk to your child and say, does this feel right? Is it exhausting you? Are you loving it? In our news research, we've got this interesting question about how much do you enjoy your extracurriculars or your academic commitments, as opposed to how much is it a source of strain? And those kids will say the strain, the negative feelings that it elicits are way more than how much I enjoy field hockey or lacrosse or whatever the activity. Those are the kids who are most troubled. So it's another way of saying to Pam is whatever course your child is choosing or you are choosing for your child, together with your child, stop and pause and constantly check in and say, is this working? If it's not, you are very much allowed to not do it. You don't have to take 6 APs. You don't have to even do the same APs you had to. Life will not stop if you change course.
That's right. That's right. And here is like the $1 million question. Like, I love this answer from Lance. He's a very successful entrepreneur himself, but didn't really go to college. So do you think college is for everyone? I mean, you have actually, I have a similar question. Sorry to interrupt. And you have such a impressive background, right? Like PhD from Yale University and Columbia teacher. And can you also demystify Ivy League school for us, and then also share with us, do you think college is for everyone?
The answer is no, and you can be incredibly wise and leave wisdom with the next generation without any college. I speak of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who was one of the most wise and noble and gentle human beings I've ever encountered. She has taught me more about life and how to be, I think, than many other people have. The deal about why you would want to have to, I guess, have to go to college is, for me, much of it is tied to what I wanted to do in the future. I was in the 9th grade in high school when I decided I want to be a child psychologist. I read this book, I'm Okay, You're Okay. And so this is what I want to do. So for me, going to college and university was essential because I wanted to have the skill set, the knowledge, the learning how to do this stuff, do the research, not just do things without knowing how to do them. Is it necessary? It depends on what you want to do with your life. And this is where I love Pam Roy's work, saying, maybe that's not what you want to do. You don't have to be a researcher, university professor. You don't need to do a PhD. The issue of whether you need to go to college or not, the one thing that worries me a little bit is that where standards have got to, so that earlier, maybe 20, 30 years ago, a good job could have been well within reach with a high school diploma. Just given more globalization and greater competitiveness, the standards tend to have gone up. So you need at least maybe a college degree or some kind of college. That would be the only, as far as I'm concerned, that's the only reason to say is, do you need that to get into that which you want to pursue for your life? If not, be an apprentice, learn on the job, do anything that's going to be able to help you support yourself and your children, fine. So I'm just conscious of the practicalities of what it is you seek to do over the long term. And that should help you decide how much you want to pursue an Ivy League or not. Now, on your second question, what would you like me to demystify about?
Because I feel like, like if you ask many parents, and especially parents in Korea, China, in quite a few Asian countries, and their dream is to send their kids to an Ivy League school. And they have this perception that if my kid goes to Yale or Harvard or any of those really famous schools, their life will be perfect. Everything will be taken care of. Is that true?
No. No, there's no attendance. It's like asking, saying if someone gets married, will your life be taken care of? Or none of this. This is such a unidimensional way of looking at things. What going to Yale did do for me, and I imagine does for many people, is give me an outstanding education. I mean, my mentor was Ed Ziegler, who's a founder of Head Start in America. He's among the best I could have hoped for. So on the education front, there's no question. The flip side is, I heard this when I was during my graduate school days. Somebody said it's better to be from Yale than at Yale. And the reason they gave was because there's not a lot of time spent on being warm and fuzzy. Professors are rewarded for spending time in office hours talking to their students about life and meaning of life and such. Keep moving, keep achieving, keep moving. I had Ed, my mentor, who believed in connections and support for his students, and I was very, very fortunate. That I don't believe was the norm, and I don't think it is. There's always a cost, like my young professor said, we are not rewarded for spending time with students like this. There's a cost. If you want to get all the grants and be the most published and the most highly cited faculty in the world, something has to give, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I to be honest with you, I don't miss that life at all. It's like so much pressure. Yeah. But on the other hand, I do agree that college is not for everyone. Actually, and that's what really inspired my friend Julia McCoy and I. We co-wrote this book, which is actually titled "Skip the Degree, Save the Tuition." And in the book, we featured an alternative way for those who don't want to college. We teach you some practical digital skills that you can actually become an entrepreneur, content marketer, SEO, like develop a digital skill. You can have a really fulfilling life. We actually interviewed quite a few people who have only maybe middle school or high school education, didn't go to college, but they are very successful in life. I think parents need to become more open-minded to see different alternatives and constant communication with their kids, what they want, and see alternatives, not be so fixated on their own, perception of success.
Yeah, when you're speaking, I'm reminded of a very important point that we should discuss, which is the role of higher education in the craziness and the mess that's going on with our kids. You think about it in US News and World Reports and the rankings that come out every year, and here we're saying our admissions rates used to be, 18% of applicants, and guess what, we're down to 6% of applicants. So the sense of scarcity and this public ranking and status and who wins and who loses, so much of this comes from higher education.
That's right.
And what we don't have is higher education coming into this conversation with K through 12 education, saying, how do we collectively as a society begin to address this? It's not enough just to tell parents your child does not need to go to college. That group, very powerful, influential group of stakeholders, must get involved in this conversation if we're going to accomplish some of what you and Pam and others are speaking about.
Yeah, I love that. So true. So here's a really great question. We're also wrapping this up, and from Alice, and asking, this message is so strong, so powerful, life-changing, especially what you said earlier. That's definitely my biggest takeaway, which is to take care of myself before I even get started to, discipline my own kids. So how can we get this powerful message to parents? Which also is one of my other questions. I feel like this part of research is quite hidden. Like as I mentioned in the introduction, you are the only one I know scholar who actually does research on this area.
I'm sorry to interrupt that, but in that Robert Wood Johnson report, I think they quoted me as saying, there is not a lot of interest. In fact, there's some hostility toward working with these privileged kids. Like this article that I mentioned to you about in the Atlantic about private schools, and there's such a negative, unkind characterization that these are somehow people that are typically classism in the opposite. Like we used to say, there used to be the culture of poverty and poor people are indolent and lazy and whatnot. We've got the same set of different, but negative attitudes. Like these are not people we're worrying about or thinking about. Why? Because they go to Yale or Princeton or to Dalton or wherever. What? No child deserves to suffer, or parent deserves, or anybody needs to suffer because they have an educational degree or because of their income. That is just not okay with me. But there is a very definite we are not interested in this group. We are not interested in scholarship and science, and I thank the good Lord for the National Academies of Science for recognizing this, and your colleagues in science for saying, yes, as you pointed out, this is an at-risk group, and this requires society's attention. It's not just a bunch of sporting parents and kids.
Yeah.
This is a societal issue. We need to come together to solve it with compassion. Like we say, for people in poverty, be compassionate. Think if I were in that situation. Come at it with that feeling and not with judgment and unkindness.
Wow, that is so powerful. So powerful. Thank you for being a pioneer in this. Thank you for leading this research so that parents like us, we can stay really informed and start sharing this body of work and inform others. It is so important. Yeah.
Oh, to answer the question of, yes, why couldn't we answer that? We could do, what am I doing with I here? This is parent education as a free course.
Yeah, I saw
any number of webinars, I've done any number of talks. They're all on my SuniyaLuthar.org. But this is what our job is. Again, something my mentor Ed taught me. When you do your science, take it and give it to the people whom you study.
Amen.
The only way to do that is through people like you and Pam and others who teach, and to the people out there.
That's exactly the reason I started my live streaming show almost 4 years ago, which was to really leverage the digital platform to inform and empower, because I feel like the research I did, it was just for other people who need to become tenure and promoted, and very little research that most people do can be translated into the everyday mainstream media. And so doing interviews like this is such a great way for me to learn and to empower other parents. Yeah. So to wrap this up, only a few minutes, you are also the co-founder of Authentic Connections. So tell us more about that and where can we learn more? Yeah.
About a little over a year ago, I quit academia altogether and decided there's too much work to be done here with parents and schools and communities. So what we do there, in a nutshell, is assess whole school communities on an emphasis on mental health and risk and protective factors that are changeable around relationships with parents, with peers, community, school climate. Come back to each individual school with an interactive dashboard of their findings, and then that's the way to draw parents into the conversation and faculty and kids and say, this is what's going on in your community in particular. If your family's in a mess for whatever reason, this is the dynamic that's going wrong, this is what's going right. So the opposite of a one-size-fits-all, very tailored, very specific to your school. Come back and say again, with rigorous data, clearly explained, and always, we're in this with you. This is not a scientist judging a community. I'm very much part of this. Our whole team has experienced all of this. So that's how another way in which, aside from talking to people like you, thankfully, is just going directly into communities and spreading the word through their own data.
Yeah.
This is what's going on. This is what the children are saying.
Yeah, I love it. And also on your personal, so what I have here is the company's website. Everyone definitely check it out, Authentic Connections. And on your personal website, you also have lots of really incredible resources. Can you also quickly share with us so parents can check it out?
Yeah, so the company's website on the work with schools is authconn.com, and mine is SuniyaLuthar.org. You got it down there, sorry. I wasn't paying attention. And in there, probably the easiest way to understand much of this research would be to go to either in the news or the blogs, and you'll find, just if you glance through the titles, you'll find, is it about parents, is it about ITV schools? The title should give you, and that's a relatively easy, quick way to get a summary of what we've been finding in the research over 35 years now. And of course, the science is there. If you want the original articles, I'm happy to send them to anyone who wants them.
Yeah, definitely subscribe to Dr. Luthar's email. And I'm just I learned so much. I truly discovered how parenting is actually a learned skill. Just because we can give birth, it doesn't make us a good mom or dad. And just the more you learn, the more we can, take care of ourselves and approach this with more sanity and to raise holistic and emotionally physically and spiritually healthy children. So yeah, so thank you so much for such an incredible interview, Dr. Luthar. I know I could just chat with you forever. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us live. Sorry about what I have no idea what's going on LinkedIn. But thank you for switching to Facebook and YouTube. So if you missed some part, definitely you can watch the replay on my YouTube channel. And you can catch the entire interview. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Luthar. What an incredible interview. Everyone, thank you for joining us live. I hope to see you again next Friday or Saturday. For some of you, the same time, same location. Have an amazing weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.